And say good morning, everyone. Welcome to Addendas, and more. Today, we're going to take a deep dive into the world of addendas because I feel like there's a lot of addendas where there's a lot of confusion. Does anybody feel like that?
Oh, yeah.
And you guys asked me about writing words into the back of the contract. I'm like, why don't you guys use the addenda for that? And you're like, there's an addenda for that? So there's an addenda for a lot of things. There's addendas for things that they're not even written into the back of the contract. So we just really should know what we actually have addendas for. And if there's one that's written by our legal team, we should use that. Anybody want to take a guess the reason that we should use the written addendas versus our own? Anybody? Well, that's a great one, Brady, right? We're not lawyers ourselves. But really, what do the lawyers do? They always write what happens if it doesn't happen, what happens if it's raining, what happens if it's sunny outside, what happens, right, Flavia? My recovering attorney in the back of the room. And that's the most important thing because I always loved when people write the home should appraise. That means nothing, right? The home should appraise. Okay. And what does that mean? If it appraises above, at, or below, you didn't talk about that. It should appraise by when, right? Before the home they close, before they, the end of time. Like you didn't talk about time, you didn't talk for price, and you didn't talk about what happens if it doesn't come to value, because you didn't talk about value either. So silly things like that mean absolutely nothing. So these are the things that when realtors decide to play attorney, get in trouble. So this is why we don't write addendas. Now, before we get jumped into our addendas and more, let's get a brief update from Trick Parker on what's happening in the market.
Oh, I'm on mute.
Okay, so
You
I'm
there.
on mute. Oh, hold on. I'm gonna mute myself. There we go.
Okay. Hope everybody had a good weekend. I have some exciting news.
Oh, good.
Let me see if I can share my screen.
Oh, you can. Hold on. You'll be able to in a second. Now you can.
Can everybody see that or no?
No, no one can see it at all.
Well, I'll just go over the highlights. Last week, our parent company, CMG, issued a new jumbo loan program for our high value homes.
Oh, good. Share us with what does that exactly mean?
Well, I can do loans up to 3.5 million.
Nice.
Up to 80% loan to value.
Oh, that is nice.
That's very nice. Most of the jumbo lenders, the higher the loan amount, the lesser the loan to value. So the highlight program, or the highlights of this program, are loan amounts up to 3.5 million, up to 80% loan to value.
Beautiful.
Fixed and adjustable mortgages, and available on primary and secondary residences.
Wow, even on a secondary.
So this is pretty strong stuff for jumbo financing. It's called our Sharp Jumbo program.
And in a secondary home, is there a distance that it has to be from the primary?
Yes and no. It has to make sense. Normally, you'd like to see 50 miles, but as the crow flies from Orlando to New Smyrna Beach, that may not be 50 miles. The key is on a secondary residence, kind of underwriting has to pass the common sense, which is, does that second home offer an amenity that you don't get at your primary residence?
Like a beach.
Like a beach.
Seriously, a beach?
Or the
or
the intercoastal, or a lake home, or something like that.
Golf
course also. Maybe.
That might be
That's
a stretch.
Because there's golf courses everywhere.
Yes, that one might be a stretch. So exciting news. Yes.
Yeah, that's great. So if I live in Windermere, I live, even if I'm not in the golf course community, I just throw a rock and there's golf courses everywhere.
Yeah.
But there's no beach, right? So I live in a lake. I have a lake community, right? But I mean, do I want to go in there? Heck no, there's alligators. But I take my chance with those sharks, right? So I could get a home on a beach, and that would be considered a second home. Liking this.
Yeah.
And then when Governor DeSantis gets rid of property taxes, I bought the most expensive home I can because I don't care about property taxes. Don't everybody steal my home I want.
So very exciting
That's
loan
great.
program. I'm proud of the company for rolling that out, particularly for our Sotheby's group, because we know you guys do a lot of high-end stuff.
Yes, we
So if you've got a client that's interested in buying a $4.5 million house and they only want to put 20% down, we have a program for them.
I love that. We have a program for you.
And I think they are going to want to see a minimum of 720 credit scores, which is pretty normal in the jumbo world. And
if you are buying that kind of property, you probably have it.
Yeah. Secondly, rates have been pretty steady this week, despite all the tariffs and then backing off of the tariffs.
What is the rate today?
They're hovering around 7%, high sixes.
I've seen high sixes.
Yeah, high sixes, 7%. That's for a conforming conventional mortgage. Of course, it depends on credit scores and loan to values and those types of things. So I locked in a client last week, loan amount of 420 on a 470 purchase price. They're basically putting 10% down, maybe a little bit more, 6.99. And we were all really excited because we have a 6 handle on that instead of a 7.
Yeah.
So that's a good thing right now.
Good. All right. Anybody have a question for Tripp? If not, we're going to jump into addendas, and you're. I'm going to turn up my volume. Okay, everybody can hear me now? Anybody online tell me they can hear me?
Yes.
Thank you, Miss Jules. Appreciate you. All right. So we're going to let Mr. Felix in, and we're going to share our screen, and we're going to take this baby away. All right, let's do it. So here we go into the world of .loop. Now, I want to share, I was talking to, I think, Miss Janet Allen, and we were talking about, since we're talking about, we don't write addendas because we're not attorneys, right? So sometimes there are verbiages that we don't have addendas for. And I talk to my handy dandy attorneys, usually Phil. Poor Phil, he is my attorney of choice because he always represents me as my attorney for fun. But I have so many attorneys that I love and use, and they're all fabulous. And when I do make them do that for me, I put it under clauses. So I do want you guys to understand and know that these clauses are here for you. But one thing, you cannot get to the clauses if you're actually in a loop. So let's just pretend we're in a loop. Let's just go to any loop. I don't know whose home this is, but it's a lease. So let's never talk about that. But if you went into, let's say, add document, you went into templates, you're not going to find clauses here. And I think that's what happens. People are looking for clauses there. They don't exist there. So you have to go to templates up here, and then that's where the clauses live. That's why people couldn't find the clauses section. They were trying to locate it from the loop. Everybody good with that? The other thing I want to point out before we dive into this, when you create a loop, we're going to start from day one, scratch one. We're going to add a loop. We're going to call it Carrie's test loop. That's where you would put the address, right? And then you say continue. And now some of you still continue to put the loop in here. Don't do that. Don't add the loop template here. Because when you do, first of all, I hate this thing because people mess up with my .loop all the time. This loop template has all of the documents, the defective drywall, all these stupid things that are going to go into that loop, and you can't take anything out. So whatever's in that file gets shoved in that file. Just leave it blank. What I've also come to realize is that the compensation forms are not in this thing. Or it's the wrong ones. I can't maintain it all and keep it all clean. I just tell you, this is a mess. It's just people are involved in my thing. So I'm not so concerned about that. So just continue. Done. I want you to create yourself an empty loop. Okay. The reason is now you're going to go into templates and you're going to pick whatever loop you want. And let's say it is a listing folder or an as-is folder or a residential folder, whatever it is. Now you pick and choose just the forms you need. You don't get the whole enchilada. Everybody with me?
Yep.
Much, much better. Everybody good? Fabulous. Thank you for playing. Have a great day. Okay. So now, by the way, the other terrible thing is nothing can be deleted from .loop. So when people are like, well, Carrie, can't you just delete that? No, even I can't delete it. Even I can't remove people because the point of .loop is for us to follow our legal requirement of maintaining documents for 5 years. So all we could do is archive. So we also don't want you guys archiving everything because we have to archive it. We need to know in case we're getting audited by DBPR where this stuff is. So that's why let us do the archiving, not you, right? Like if you're in an old file and things are a mess and you want to archive an old loop, you know, you create this form like this and it's an old loop and you don't want that, an old form in there, that's fine. Like you put the wrong form in, archive that. I don't care about that. But an old loop, like it's an old file, don't archive your loops. Let us do that because we need to upload it to another. Chris Flynn, how are you? It's been a while. We need to make sure that we're uploading it into another database too, because we like to do things that way. We're going to maintain these files in 2 places. We're going to maintain it in .loop, and then just in case, a fail-safe place, we're going to also maintain it in another database. So we have to put it in both places. And if you've archived it, guess what? We might not put it in another place. And then if .loop goes down and we get audited, it's not going to be in the other place. So everybody cool with that? Everybody with me? So don't archive your loop. Good? Thank you. Okay. Now, getting back to our templates. Here we are. Here's our beautiful templates. We have tried to put addendas that make sense. And I say try because people get in my little folders and they mess it up and they make me angry. But there are, here you go. Where are they? Addenda folders, frequently used listing addendas. Let's take a peek. You see this? So these are the addendas that would typically go with a listing. We have frequently used sale addenda. So there are these folders that have these things in here. I personally never go in here, and I'm going to tell you why. I don't like to use them because they could be old. They could be wrong. I might not agree with them because Jesus, Lord above, what am I looking at a short sale addenda for? Is that frequently used, Lord? Come on, guys. When was the last time we had a short sale? I don't know who the heck put that in there. I am not happy about that. Who is messing in my loop again? I would never put a short sale addendum in there. Can I ask you guys, what was the last time anybody in this room used a short sale addendum? Never. 2000. Would you say it's frequently used? I'm not going to use the word frequent in that sense from 2012, right? I mean, unless we're having a misunderstanding of what the word frequency means. I don't know. So they are in here, guys. But this is where your frustration when you call me and your hair's on fire and you're like, Carrie, I can't find the addenda, right? I've had that call from so many of you. And it's because you're looking in places like this and I don't know who's maintaining this. So I'm not telling you that these little files are bad. I don't like them. Okay. I'm maintaining all the time the as is folder, which I hate, the residential folder, just the contract, you know. Okay. The listing folder, those are the ones I'm maintaining, right? But where do I want you to go? Does anybody know? Can anybody please tell me where I really want you to go for addendas? Nobody's playing for 50.
You said don't go on the ones side.
Yeah. Where do I really want you to go for the best addendas?
Florida Interactive Forms.
Lisa. I bet, Mark, you probably had it too. Florida Interactive Forms. I really, guys, want you to get used to just going there. That is the direct feed from the Legal Bar Associates. That is the newest, the latest, the greatest. Every form that they have created will feed from here. Now, that also makes it a little sloppy, doesn't it? Like you have to know how to search. So this is what I'm going to teach you right now. It's not hard to search if, yes, I'll look at your favorite. I know it's your favorite. I'm trying to make it not your favorite, but yes, you all love this dang as is. I don't know why, but I'm trying to break it from you. But whether you're in an as is, a residential, the addendas on the back are the same. Actually, what we're going to do for fun, we're going to download this one. Let's open that. And then I'm going to go over here and get the residential, my favorite. But again, somebody asked me this weekend too, Carrie, your favorite, we should always use the residential for the buyer, right? Is that true? Thank you, Lisa. You're on fire and fuego. Look at her go. There's no always, there's no should always do anything because it's all relative to the situation. If I have a buyer putting in an offer on a home with a roof older than 20 years, which contract am I going to use? Thank you, Miss Lisa. She is like, what is she going to win today? She's going to win something today. I'm feeling it. I don't know what it is, but it's something good. Because in the residential contract, the limited roof life is not considered something that the seller must repair or replace, right? Which is why if I have a seller with an old roof, I'm requiring a residential contract. But if I have the buyer, I'm not going in on a residential if I have a chance because they can't get out because of the old roof, right? And let's be real. Insurance costs, sadly, they have a problem with old roofs, which is ridiculous because they think they own all this stuff. Like at a tile roof, they say 20 years. Tile roof is good 50 years. Come on. But they're going to say 20 years. So the problem is I'm still going to go in on an as is because I need to get an insurance quote ASAP because maybe they could still get insurance. So you can't get out with the financing contingency because they have insurance, but it's really high. And the buyer might be like, I don't want that high insurance quote. Well, you can't get them out in the financing contingency. And if you are in a residential contract, that's all you have, right? But if you're in an as-is contract, you have your cancel for any reason clause. So as long as you figure that out within the cancel for any reason clause, you back out. Alejandro.
If you're representing the seller and you have an older roof, it's better to pay the as is or the.
So Alejandro said he wants to clarify, if you have a seller with an old roof, are you better to ask for the residential or as is? If I have a seller with an old roof, I'm requesting a residential because I am locking in that buyer that they cannot cancel for any reason. They can, if they're stuck with the home. Now, that means I already know that I would have done my due diligence. I would have talked to our mortgage people. I would have said you could get insurance on this roof using our mortgage people. And these are the quotes. I would have done that due diligence, right? And therefore, when they get into this contract, they have no cancel for any reason clause. I already know they can get insurance. So that means they can't get out with financing. Unless they're so marginal a buyer. And would we have already accepted that offer? Why would we have, right? So you're covered. You're in a contract. I mean, and then I take a really good deposit because now they can walk away, but they're walking away losing their money. You follow me? Everybody with me? This is knowing how to use a contract. Now, if I'm a buyer, I also know how to use a contract. So I know that with the residential, I have no cancel for any reason clause. I know that I cannot get out with the limited roof life problem. So if the financing, I can still get insurance, it's just very expensive. I can't get out with the financing clause, right? If you can't get insurance, you're not going to get financing. Everybody with me? Yep. But if you can get insurance, it's just expensive. Guess what? And especially if you're well qualified, you're stuck, aren't you? You're buying that home or you're losing your deposit, which is why I'm going in on an as is, finding out how much that insurance costs, making sure I'm comfortable with that during the cancel for any reason clause so I can back out before I lose my deposit. You with me? This is the brilliance of knowing your contract. That's why there is no one size fits all. Right? Everybody got that? Any questions on that? Because that is unfortunately a real situation we deal with on a daily basis.
You
you say cancel for any reason, thought you mean the inspection window?
Yes, it's, if they call it inspection, isn't it cute? You can get an inspection. It could be by your brother. It could be by your little baby. It doesn't matter. It's really not. You have a period of time that you're allowed to have inspections. But the reality is the buyer at the sole buyer's discretion can cancel for any reason. Language right out of the vacant land and the commercial contract. It's cancel for any reason. Yeah. Gotta love it. Yes, Mark.
Question for the cancel for any reason part.
Uh-huh.
Let's say we're representing a buyer.
Mhm.
We submit addendum making the request. The seller says, no, we're not going to do it.
Yep.
And then we decide we're going to cancel and we send the cancellation.
Yep.
What if the seller changes their mind and decides, okay, we'll give in to the initial addendum? Would you have to have a new contract
No.
or they just sign it and you just move forward?
Yeah. Here's the reality. That happens all the time. So you could just go ahead and move forward. I've had situations where contracts have literally canceled for 3-4 days. They've come back to the table and we just continued on the same contract. Sometimes a lender may require, a lot of times they don't want you to, because if you do a new contract, you have to start the loan all over again, right? If it's cash, nobody cares either. So most of the time an addendum will just suffice, like we're agreeing to whatever terms you've just agreed to and you move forward. Yeah. Remember, contracts are negotiable as long as both parties agree. You just want to make sure whatever you're agreeing to is in writing. Good morning, Ms. McKee. But yes, you can move forward on that contract. That's already had that situation. Okay. So let's go back to how do we find the right addendum? Now, what I want you to see here, this is very interesting. And I always get a kicker out of this. So I only want my new people to answer this because, well, it's just fun for me. Nobody who knows the answer can answer this because then it's just not fun. Okay. So these are both written by the same Florida Bar Association. The as-is and the residential contract, which we've trained on, are the exact same except for the inspection portion, right? Everybody with me? So that would stand to reason that the addendas that would go along with the contracts would be the same, right? Which is why the CRISP, oh, which by the way, did you guys see? You probably didn't because only a geek like me would notice this, that the land and the CRISP contracts have changed. They used to be a weird time situation where it would be sometimes business and sometimes calendar days. They've all switched to calendar days. Not that it matters because we don't use CRISP, but anyway, it was just interesting. I just thought I'd throw that out there. Okay, I know nobody knows, just me. So anyway, moving on. These contracts are exactly the same. They're all calendar days. What does MLS use? Business days. Contracts are calendar days, right? So here you go, except if the date falls on a Saturday, Sunday, or legal holiday, what happens? It moves to the regular business day. So if your inspection falls on a Sunday, what happens? It moves to Monday. If your money deposit is due on a Sunday, what escrow company is collecting it on Sunday? None. So it moves to Monday. Time, is it 5 p.m. or is it 12 p.m.? 11:59.
I write 11:59 p.m. EST on mine. Yeah.
Well, which one is it per contract? Does anybody know?
11:59.
You're so brilliant, Miss Jules Carnero. Yes, at one point, the last two changes though, it was 5 p.m. and I loved that because who wants to wait till 11:59? It's just stupid. But no, it's back to 11:59 p.m. Yes.
Vacant land when they actually call it out, right?
Yeah, I know, vacant land, but as is residential and residential are 11:59 p.m.
Nice.
However, in an escrow situation, unless it's being transferred, what company that you had to drop off a check, which don't ever drop off a check unless it happens to be a, cash, what's it called? Good as cash. You know what I'm talking about. Cashier's check, thank you, would be open after 5, like none, right? So in that instance, it would matter. But if it's being wired, as long as the wire comes through by 11:59 p.m., you're good. Okay, So let's take a peek at K and L. Reserved, reserved. I'm in an as-is contract. What does that mean? Nobody can answer who's been with me before. Anybody know? That means you, Mark, you can't answer. Does anybody know what that means?
Used it.
Reserved, reserved. It's my favorite. These two, reserved, reserved. Anybody know what it means? I guess some funny answers sometimes. I was hoping for some funny ones. Nothing funny?
Yeah. ChatGPT.
No. Nobody wants to answer. Okay, anybody can answer now. Anybody? Oh, you guys are just not fun today. In the regular residential contract, K is the as-is clause that turns the residential contract into the buyers have your cake and eat it too. And the L is the right to inspect/cancel, which also turns it into the have your cake and eat it too clause. And sometimes they add both, which is ridiculous because it's have your cake and eat it too double clause. It's like double duty. Everything else is exactly the same. So because the as is that, why would you have that added? So they just say reserved, reserved, because it's exactly, everything else is exactly the same. So they have to just say reserve, reserve, because they don't want to replace it with anything, because these are all exactly the same. And they don't match the contract because it is the contract. Is everybody following what I'm saying?
It's a different contract. They could have just skipped that line. They didn't have to.
They wanted
But
it
they
to
want to
totally
check.
match. Mhm.
I mean, I like this.
Yep. Yep. So everybody, you usually hear some things though. I've heard what reserved, the people make up what reserved means. It's really funny. Yeah, like they make up why it's reserved for special thing. I mean, it's hysterical. Like there's actually an addendum that says reserved. It's really funny. But there is no addenda that says reserved. It just means it's a placeholder because in the as is contract, you don't need these two addendas because it is that. Yeah. Okay. Now, how do we find in Florida interactive forms these specific addendas? It's very easy. You actually look for how it's written. Like the home to sell addenda is the hardest one because everyone's like, oh, well, we're going to make it contingent on the home selling. You actually just see how are they writing, and it's sale of buyer's property. See, it's not home to sell. We always call it home to sell contingency because that's kind of what it is, but it's actually called sale of buyer's property. Let's just check it. Is it V, sale of buyer's property? Yes, it is for 20. There we go. It's both V, sale of buyer's property on both contracts. So if I needed to find that one, I simply go into dot loop. Where do we go? Where do we go, Lisa? Yeah, Florida interactive forms. And we don't write the whole thing because less is more. So I start typing sale of, and there it is. But notice, if you wanted to double check, it would tell you here, if there were more than one, we don't have to double check it. You click on it and let's take a quick peek. This one I get a lot of questions on. I had another question about this just this weekend. I think, I don't even know if it's really true, but maybe like 5, 6, 7 years ago, maybe there was a different form of this where the seller actually was agreeing to change their price. I don't even remember if that actually was true. That's just what used to happen. Guys, I just want to be very clear because this is coming back up again, and I think we're going to see more of these. The sale of buyer's property, let's just look at it real quick. This means when you add this to a contract that you're saying the contract is contingent on the sale of buyer's property located. So this is the buyer's current home. And they're saying if the property doesn't close by a specific day, right? So they give a day, the buyer may within 3 days after. So if you say your home's going to close by June 1st, then they have the 2nd, the 3rd, and the 4th they can cancel. Okay. And then they have to do it with written notice to the buyer. And as long as they've done that, they get their money back. Then they tell you whether or not the property is presently under contract. And if it is under contract, then at the time this offer is made, notice that the buyer shall provide the seller a copy of the contract with third party's identification and purchase price information obliterated. Okay. Does it say every other contract, every other time, we're going to keep you completely updated about the contract. Did you see that? No, because it's not in there. Does it say if it falls through, we have to notify you? No, because it doesn't say that. Does it say if the property, does it say anything about if the property changes or if they cancel, we have to notify you? Do you see anything about that? No. I've gotten so many questions on this. And do we have to tell you the price? No. All we have to do is show you that we actually have a contract. That's it. Or not. It may not even be under contract, right? At the time you make the offer. So essentially all this is doing is saying we have a home and it's going to close on this day, whether or not it's on the market. We're going to tell you that, right? And after that day, we have 3 days to cancel and we can get our money back. So what happens sometimes is, let's say we're going to say June 1st. Sometimes they make the closing date June 1st on the new home that they're going contract with you on, which means they can close 3 days after. So what does that mean? The buyer can go all the way past your closing date and cancel and get their money back. So you need to think about that before you go into contract and take your seller's home off the market, and they can wait the whole time, which may be July 1st, whatever that may be, and then they can still get their money back. Because your seller is risking everything and the buyer is risking nothing. No skin in the game whatsoever. Are we all clear? And they don't have to keep you updated. I'll go right to you, Moram, in a second. And they don't have to tell you what's going on because there's nothing in here that tells you they have to. So I had several questions about this weekend. Do I have to let you know when it falls through? No. Do I have to tell you when the changes, we get into contract again? No. Doesn't say that, does it? It's just if you're presently under contract, you have to tell them. Y'all clear on that?
Yeah, it doesn't even say that if it does go under contract,
If you weren't under contract, you have to tell them then. No.
doesn't even.
No, it doesn't say that either. You as a seller, if you accept this, are completely in the dark. Now, the other agent certainly in their goodness of their heart can tell you, but they don't have to. Just know that. Yes, Marima.
Okay, so because of what you're saying, I'm assuming it doesn't even matter if they put in a date in regards to like when they're going to be closing by.
It does
When-
because they have 3 days thereafter still cancel and get their money back.
Okay, so it would matter to them, but for us,
And
if
it
we're gonna-
matters to you too, because remember, your seller's taking your home off the market for that date and 3 days thereafter and risking everything and still not getting any money hard. The
Well,
deposit
what
is
if they don't
not
put
hard.
in a date?
You have to put in a date, otherwise it's not executable.
Okay.
Any contract has to have a date. If it doesn't have a date, no matter what type of contract it is not executable.
She's asking, is it the real closing date? But you're giving a copy of the contract. There's no price, but the closing date will be on the copy.
Yeah, even if the property is not under contract, you have to guess how long it's going to take you to sell it and when it's going to close by. Because why would you as a seller even want to entertain something that you're not saying when it's going to close by? You follow me? You have to put a date there.
Carrie?
Yes.
So, I mean, if you have to put a date and they can still cancel after 3 days, what is the point of accepting this one?
Well, thank you, Jules. You're really actually just leading up to my very next thing. I appreciate you so much. That is X, the kick-out clause. So my point to you, and thank you for that lead-in because that was just so perfect, is why in God's name, if you're representing the seller, would you accept that? Because basically, the buyer's risking nothing, the seller's risking everything. So if I am on the sell side, I'm going to take what's called a kick-out clause. Now, here's the thing I want to point out. Most addendas have two. Notice this one is a vacant land. You don't want to use that one. Backup contract kick-out clause. You see how this says CRSP? That's the crisp one. Don't take that one. This is the correct one. I would counter, if I had gotten an offer with that beauty, with this. Let's just have a look, shall we? Seller will have the right to continue to show the property, which, let's all be real, you have to pen the property. There's no form, no status active with contract. It doesn't exist. Please do not ask me. No, it has to be pending. Okay. So you're going to continue to show the property while it's pending and solicit and enter into a bona fide backup contract, which we're going to look up too, because guys, that means you execute that contract and take a backup addenda. We're going to go into that. With the third parties that are subject to terminate this primary contract. So upon entering into the backup contract, the seller gives the buyer the backup contract, again, with the third party's identification and purchase price information obliterated. So they don't see, again, how much they're going to pay for it, and they don't see the third party's information. Now, if they want to continue to be in first position, now they have to put more money down. You decide how much. 1,000, 10,000, 50,000. It's up to you. It's up to the price of the home, right? To the escrow agent within 3 days. Now, here's the beautiful thing. When they give the additional escrow deposit within 3 days, they waive all contingencies for financing and sale of buyer's property. They have to waive both. Because if they didn't just waive if they waived the sale of buyer's property, great, they close that one. But guess what? Oftentimes they won't be approved for financing. Exactly. So you have to waive both. So, because if they said, okay, yeah, I'll get rid of my home to sell contingency, sure. But now I didn't sell my home, so I didn't get financing, so I still get my money back. It doesn't work. They have to waive both. So basically they're going hard on their money, just like with a builder that day, well, within 3 days, and they're putting more money. Now they have skin in the game. A lot of skin in the game. They gotta be willing to put more money down and willing to close, or they get their money back then, and the second buyer, who's the backup buyer, goes into first position. Everybody clear on that? This is my favorite thing. This is total builder world. When somebody gives you an offer, you're the sell side with a backup contract, you counter with this. It's my favorite. I use it. Oh, this is why we're doing this. This is my favorite addenda, honestly. I love this. This is like the, yeah, right? Like, oh yeah, we could do that if
Only kick
you do.
out because you can kick out the.
You kick them out.
the-
Yep.
The first.
It's the only thing. Now listen, there's still a disadvantage to the seller. Their house is still pending. And a lot of people don't want to put an offer in or even come see a home that's pending. However, we have an $8.5 million home in Eustis that has a backup contract with a kickout clause. So go figure. Yeah, it is a great tool. Sometimes it does work. So sometimes it doesn't.
So every time someone puts in, buyer has to sell their home to get your home, use this one.
I like it. I mean, there might be a case it doesn't work. Like,
No, but
let's say like
occasions it will.
if they're closing in 3 days, you don't need a kickout close, right?
Okay.
Right? But if the home is like, they're gonna close in 2 months and they haven't even got it on the market, or just putting it on the market, heck yeah, I'm using a kickout clause. If my seller really wants to entertain this, why wouldn't I use a kickout clause? Because your seller is risking everything and the buyer's risking absolutely nothing.
Most of the time, I don't even want to take a 7 or 10 day inspection period, no less go contingency
Yeah.
in that moment, then, and my seller wants to do it, I definitely want to pull that out.
You know, and especially in a luxury property, let's be real. If you have something 1, 2, 3, when you get a high several $1 million property, this is really when you definitely want to use a kickout clause. I mean, you can use it on any price point, but for sure, I will be using the kickout clause on that. And sometimes it's a weird reverse psychology in the higher price homes too. It's like, oh, somebody wanted that. I think I want that too. It's interesting. So it's an interesting thing. Not necessarily in the lower priced homes because there's a lot more of them. In the higher priced homes, when there's not many of them, you'll find more people want them when they're no longer available.
You see situations where you counter with that and they will sometimes drop the contingency and just go, never mind, we want to just go ahead. and get the
Yes,
contract."
we have seen sometimes where they've just dropped.
That kind
The
of-
question was, when you counter with a kick out, do you sometimes see where people have dropped the home to sell contingency? The answer to that is yes. And you know what? Happy to do that too. Listen, you drop yours, we'll drop ours.
They're just kind of bluffing you.
Yeah, you know, less contingencies are better, right? So that's fine too. But the point is, don't let your seller be the one who's always taking all the hits, especially in today's market, right? Mhm.
So with this clause.
Yes.
You go with the backup, you just have to wait you just have to tell the buyer, hey, we're going with another deal.
Yeah, let me now show you the backup. Because, and actually first let's take a quick peek because look here. There is W, backup contract. A lot of people don't even know there's an actual addenda for that. I have had, this is an awful thing, and I'm just going to tell you, it's also been on my team. It's just so sad. People be like, I have a backup contract. I'm like, great, where is it? I never saw it. Was it executed? No, but it's a backup contract. How is it a backup contract? You didn't execute the contract and you don't have the backup addendum. That's not a backup contract. It's a wish and a hope and a prayer. That is not a strategy, guys. You have to actually do this. That is a backup contract. Worse yet, we thought we were the backup contract and we had nothing and we lost the deal. You need to do the backup contract. So here you go. Notice again, backup vacant. So notice we've just said kickout clause and backup also for vacant land. These are not just for residential. They're also for vacant land. Just wanted to point that out. All right. So here we go. Backup contract right here. And notice it said W. And if you remember, it was W in our contract. So that's another way to remember it. So here you go. When you're doing a backup contract, the regular contract is completely executed. Buyer and seller sign everything. Okay, then it says this backup contract is subject to the termination of a prior executed contract between seller and third party for the sale of the property. If the prior contract is terminated and the seller delivers written notice of the termination to the buyer on or before a date. So you come up with a date, like the date the other one was supposed to close or what have you. This contingency shall be removed and this backup contract shall move forward in first position. The effective date of the backup contract shall be the date the seller delivers written notice of the termination of the prior executed contract. The buyer may terminate the backup contract by delivering written notice to the seller prior to the date the seller delivers written notice. So what this is saying, I go into backup in a backup position. I find another home. I can terminate it at any point. I don't have to worry about getting money back because until this is fully executed, remember, 3 days thereafter is when I put the money down, right? So I can sign this whole contract, but my money's not due till, let's say, 3 days after the contract is executed. Contract's not executed, right? Because I'm in backup. Once Brady sends me notification that the other person has canceled, now that day I got that notification, today is my executed date. Now I have 3 days to get the deposit in. But he hasn't sent me that yet. I found a better home. I'm sending him notice in writing, an email, that I'm withdrawing my offer. Now I am free and clear. I'm buying something else. He has no more backup contract. That's how it goes. So you're not locked in with a backup contract, but it gives you as the buyer total flexibility, really. You didn't put any money down. It's like putting something on hold with no money. How great is that?
Am I not obligated because I signed the backup offer?
Because you didn't put any money down. And number two, it's never been executed fully because you didn't get the notification that you've gone into first position. So you need two things. You need actual, this is one thing that's funny. If you don't have a deposit, nothing is actually considered executed. So when people think, well, it's like, it's a VA, so it's 100% financing. If you don't put some kind of deposit down, I hate to use consideration because, some people think chattel will work or like a car, or, and we don't take, animals here. So you need money. Yeah. That's why I'm very careful about what I talk about. It has to actually be money. Yeah. So we need a deposit, right? But until that actually happens, you really don't have an executed contract. So when people don't turn in money, your contract was never fully executed. Yeah. Which means that you're in default, by the way, unless, right. But if you, that's why you can't just walk away either. You have to notify if you want to back out, because if he tells you, oh, you're good, you can't just have walked away, because now you're in first position because you did sign a contract, right? So you have to notify if you don't want to buy it anymore, because you did sign a contract. Everybody with me? Okay, but I love the backup contract. I love the kickout clause. The homes to sell contingency is not as scary if you're utilizing it with all the parts and parcels like this, right? But if you just use one thing, it doesn't work well. It's like kind of using, part of your makeup and not all of it together. You look kind of weird. You gotta use it all, right? It's like half a face. It's not very good, right? You gotta do the whole face. Can't put makeup on part. So this is the whole thing. You got to use the whole thing together. Okay. Questions on that? Everybody good on that? Maybe, maybe not. I think those are some of the biggest ones that I think we need to really look at. Condominium rider. This is a huge one that you all need to be using correctly. It is in the condo folder. So actually, I want you to go into the condo. Well, you don't have to go into it. I'm going to go into it. But if you go into the condo folder, which is the resident condo sale folder, it is in here. So you have the residential or the other one, residential and the as is are both in here. But who put the crisp in here? Jesus Christ. See what I'm saying? Oh, I have to go in here. Somebody else. I got to get rid of that. Who put that in there? Oh my God. Jesus. Why would we have a vacant land in there? Oh my God. Who is messing up in my, makes me so angry. I know. Bring it in. Bring it in. Who is messing up about that? The worst part is you guys are going to go in there and use the stuff, and you're going to be using vacant land. You're going to be using a Chris. You say no. I'm going to see it in my folder, and you guys are going to be like, it was in the top loop. And I'm going to be like, I don't know who put it in there. Okay. So this, guys, you have to see is the newest condominium. And let's just see. 1224. This is the newest one. Now, how do you know? Because let's say you're buying the condominium and it would have to be given to you completed. Oh, God help us, from the listing agent. I'm so sorry. How do you know if it's the right one? It has to have this section here. This is the part that has been changed. Under section 10, which is on the second page, it has to say all of this about the new milestone inspection report, structural integrity, reserve study, and turnover reports. This is what was changed. If you guys remember, we did a training on this in the beginning of the year. It tells you if the milestone report has been required to be completed. We all remember, how many stories does the building have to have? Thank you, Maria. 3 stories or more. And in Florida, how old does it have to be in Orlando?
30 years.
30 years, unless you're by the water, and then 25, right? Okay. But it'll tell you, what if you're buying a property that is only 25 years old? Or worse, 28. Yeah. So the point is, it hasn't had the report done, but you better be telling your customers all about the report. This is the really scary ones, right? Like if it's already been done, I feel good about it, right? But what if it's not been required to have been completed yet, but it's 3 stories or higher? That's really the ones I'm concerned about. I'm not so concerned about the ones that already had it. Or if it's 2 stories, I'm good. I'm doing a dance, right? It's the ones that are coming of age in the next year, 2, 3 years that have not had it because it's not been required yet. Those are scary. The turnover inspection report, what are those for, guys? New construction where the developer has been doing it that have turned it over. That's what those are for. So obviously if it's not, you wouldn't need that. The structural integrity reserve study. This is huge because this is checking to see if you have the money required if it's going to need work. Okay, that is almost more important than if it needs work, right? Because great, you need work, but you don't have the money to fix it. And this is why we have buildings, 80 buildings in Central Florida that they had to condemn. That's horrible.
Henry,
Yes.
did we ever find out that list?
You know, I don't have that list. Do you have that list? Can you find out that list for us? Any way you can know? I'm going to make Trip find out for us because he is
Okay.
an expert searcher.
And
Okay,
and
if he
and
can-
before we move on, as cooperating brokers agents are not a very helpful, savvy, or they don't have a trainer like you. Some folks they're actually selling condominiums and or buying. They just don't fill anything out, and the HOA it's not very helpful. So your suggestion would be to get the seller
Mhm.
to
Yeah,
request all the information because the HOA has to provide the seller with the information. Is that correct?
correct. And it says on here that it is the seller who has to have this completed.
Oh, good, because everyone always says, it's on your buyer.
Nope. It says the rights and obligations under paragraph 11 and 12 and the contract maintain, repair, replace, and treat limited to the seller's individual condominium unit unless the seller is otherwise responsible. I mean, it also says in here, the buyer's which seller shall have at seller's expense, provide the buyer with current copies of condominium. All of this says it's the seller's requirement to do it.
Correct? We do not have an executed contract until that is provided and is assigned.
Well, that's not really
What was the
true. You
question?
do have an executed contract, but what you don't, you have a 3-day right of rescission that begins once you get these documents, it opens up a 3-day right of rescission. So you have an executed contract, but once you get these documents, it opens up a 3-day right of rescission. So, great, how good. The problem is if you never get the documents, you have a huge problem.
And I'm not going it's not filled out properly.
No,
And
you
so if they
can't.
don't provide it
Yeah.
filled out properly,
You may never ever get you'll have that 3-day right of rescission that will be always open, right?
but if they
Exactly.
don't fill out properly, I have to have it executed. So where am I at there?
I mean, this is the problem. The
What was the
condominium
question?
writer, she's saying, if you don't have the forms filled out properly, how can you have an executed contract? So the condominium rider is an addenda that goes along with the contract, which actually is not part of the executed contract. However, it opens up a 3-day right of rescission. So it's not that you don't have an executed contract. You do have an executed contract, but the 3-day right of rescission will open once you get all these documents. So the problem is, what if you never get the documents, right? It never opens up the 3-day right of rescission. But I would suggest you could always write buyer and seller agree the contract is contingent upon the buyer receiving, but it tells you right here. This agreement is voidable by buyer delivering written notice to the buyer's intention to cancel within 3 days. I mean, it's all over this form.
If
So-
they, only after they provide documents if it's not.
Well, and so you could write into the form that the buyer and seller agree, the seller to distribute all these forms. You could write them all down within 5 days of execution, 10 days of execution. You could write that into your contract. Yeah, under additional terms. I mean, just to cover yourself. The problem is we've done that and they haven't done it.
Okay.
And then what do you have? You're in default, the seller's in default. And to your point, Jules, many of the listing agents are terrible and they don't have the documents. Mariah has been dealing with that one for a long time. Sometimes they don't even have the documents. Like the frequently asked questions may not even be written by the association, and that's one of the required documents. So these are the things that you can have, and then you get to a point where you have to make a decision. Does the buyer want to move forward or not? And sometimes the lender doesn't allow, sometimes the lender does, but at some point a decision has to be made, and not by you, but by the buyer. And you would have to tell the buyer that they have to speak to other counsel, an accountant, an attorney. We cannot guide them in that because we are not going to take that liability on. 150%. We need to assist them, letting them know all of the things that they need to be receiving, which is right here. We need to try to assist them, telling them we need to receive all these things. We need to make sure they understand what these reports are and why they're necessary. And if they are necessary in the building that they're buying, if it's 2-story, they're not, right? But we can't get blood out of a stone. So at some point they have to decide on their very own not up to us whether or not they're going to assume the risk or not. And we, may have to have them sign a hold harmless. That may end up having to be what we need them to sign, which, is something that actually our attorneys have been writing for us. So we will be providing that.
process.
Yes, we've already been working on that because of all this exact kind of thing.
Right, but you said that this is not part of the contract, Carrie, but it does say addendum A, so
No,
would-
no, it's an addenda, which goes along with the contract. But you can have an executed contract without an addenda completely filled in.
Got it,
Addendas, yeah, that's the thing.
got it. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
A lot of these cams will not fill this stuff out and they just.
I know, that's 150%. Maria said you can have a lot of, different associations that will not fill these out. And that is absolutely the situation we're facing. And I will tell you, I don't know that it's going to get any better because of these requirements are getting stricter. And that's the truth of it. However, it's going to get to a point that we're going to have to advise our customers to seek, legal advice, accounting advice, and they're going to be the ones who have to make the decision. And that's why Premier Sotheby's has been working on a hold harmless form that we will get them to sign. If, it's got to be their decision. At the end of the day, if they don't have all the information, they're going to decide whether or not they want to move forward. We're not the ones who make that decision, right? Everybody good on that? I mean, it is what it is. Either you want to buy it or you don't. We can provide all the information, let you know everything you need to get, but we are not attorneys. We're not structural engineers. We're not accountants. Those things have to be determined by the proper guiding authorities, not by us. Everybody, and anybody who gets into those realms are just really opening up a can of worms and far too much risk for yourself. So what you should only do is point them in the direction of the right person to speak to. Do not take that burden on yourself. Everybody good? I mean, as good as you can be. Okay,
Yes.
so yeah, exactly. That is the most important one, the condo rider A in the condominium. Okay, that is very important. Homeowners Association, we all know that one. Nobody's really doing sellers financing, FHA financing. One thing I'm going to point out about FHA financing, I see this sometimes, and you have to say search federal. Let's see. Let's say FH. Why is it? Oh, am I not under Florida Interactive Forms? That's why. If you're not under Florida Interactive Forms, guys, it won't work. There he goes. Notice there is a CRISP and there's a Florida Bar Association. I have seen on a number of occasions the wrong document. The CRISP does not match our contract. Whatever you do, do not use the wrong addenda with our contract. It is a conflict with the contract. So you want to be very careful not to do that, okay? The other thing I want to point out that I've seen recently was very funny. I don't remember how much the home was. Let's call it 500 grand. They put under inspection repairs, 500 grand. Yeah,
I'll take it.
no, okay. We are not going to be putting that here. So just in general, if it's a VA or a FHA, I would typically put $200-300 here. That's what I would cap that at. You can rate 0, but I mean, it shouldn't be the cost of the home, okay? You got to keep that number down, just no matter what side you're on, okay? Now, also what I want to point out, whether you're FHA financing, this is saying this is the number that the home has to appraise under. These are both appraisal contingencies essentially, but notice it says this is FHA. The purchaser shall have the privilege and the option of proceeding with the consummation of the contract without regard to the amount of the appraised valuation. So if they can still get the loan, it doesn't matter if it appraised, which is pretty cool. And VA, by the way, says exactly the same. Purchaser shall have, what does it say? Elect to proceed. In the election, in the event the purchaser elects to proceed with this contract without regard to the amount of reasonable value established, then they can continue on without it as well. So both the VA and the FHA can move on even if the home doesn't appraise. Everybody good with that? That's a new one because FHA used to not be able Remember when the FHA couldn't move on? If they didn't get the appraisal, they couldn't get the loan? Now they can. That's interesting, right?
Yeah, back in the nineties, FHA was losing a lot of opportunities to conventional mortgages because Fannie and Freddie rolled out 3% down.
Yeah. Even the 1%, remember that?
And Fannie and Freddie didn't require
Yeah.
an FHA certified inspection, and it
Yeah.
didn't have to be an FHA appraisal, so they changed their standards.
They've gotten a little bit loosey-goosey on the FHA, just saying. So anyway, I just wanted to point that out. Let's look at the appraisal contingency because I continue to get questions on the appraisal contingency. It just never strikes me, never. Yes, I have had them, which is interesting. Not the gap. I have not gotten the gap one. Notice, yes, it's in the contract. Let's take a quick peek at that too. Thank you for bringing that up. Let's look at this. That's a residential, it'd be too long to get back. So let's go back in the as is. Okay, I know we're running a little over. Everybody have a couple more minutes? Well, if you don't, you can drop off. So, all right, let me just show you this under financing real quick. We have added, not me, but they had added, which I really liked, under the financing, which was fabulous. Because it was so stupid that there was like your financing period, then it would end, then there was the appraisal. What the hell was that about? That was ridiculous. So back in a couple of years ago, 2021, 2022, they had added it in, which was great. So now you have to have within your time period the appraisal done. So that has to happen during the loan approval period. And that is part and parcel of your financing. So if your appraisal, what? So if the appraisal is not sufficient to meet the home's value, it can be taken into effect of whether or not the person is granted the loan, right? Tripp, maybe you can say that better.
Sorry.
So if, for example, the home, let's say was 500 grand, let's just make it easy. It appraised for 490. If it was a tight borrower, maybe they didn't get qualified because it was too tight. They didn't have money to bring to the table, or their debt to income was too tight or something like that, right?
Right?
Right. However, if you're like an 80-20 borrower, you had good monies down, and if it was that same case where it was 500 and it came in 490, it's not going to affect your approval, right? Because you have plenty of money. So you just put a little more money down, right? You're not going to deny them the
Going
loan.
to base the loan amount on the appraised value, which is the lesser of the two. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, but you're not going to deny someone the loan if the home didn't appraise, if they have a lot of money.
Provided they have sufficient funds.
Yes.
Exactly.
So they weren't protected, in other words, they didn't.
So they're not protected under this. The only people who are going to be protected under this is like an FHA borrower who's really tight. And the FHA borrower and the VA borrower anyway have their own addenda. So this does protect somebody who is putting maybe a 5% down, maybe a 1%. But if you're like,
Based on percent down at the top and how much you put on the interest rate, did you fill out?
oh, but yeah, but that's not really the appraisal amount.
So, and if you put
Yeah.
5% on the top as the down payment.
Yeah, but if you're putting down that there was a conventional loan and it was fixed and it was at, 6.99 and it dropped, that really wasn't because it didn't appraise. It's because they didn't get approved for 6.99. It's now that they're up at 7.5,
Well,
right?
But if you wrote it at a 95% LTV and it didn't appraise.
But they don't have 95 here.
All the way top contract is, you put in your LTV. If I wrote it 95% LTV, he's not, and it doesn't appraise, they're.
Yeah, if the lender is willing to say, because it's a different term than he was agreed upon at the time of the contract, sometimes we've had that, but realistically, I've seen lenders not wanting to do that. I would tell you, if this is a very qualified buyer, they're putting, 20% or more down, I would do an appraisal contingency.
So anyways, that's when it would come into place.
Yeah, I would say, if you have a qualified buyer, I would do an appraisal contingency. That's my point. Yeah, for that purpose. Now, but this is what people don't understand with the appraisal contingency. This has nothing to do with the seller. I still get this question. People think that the seller has to do something if the home doesn't appraise. The seller doesn't have to do anything. It means right here, contract is contingent upon the buyer obtaining at their own cost a licensed Florida appraiser on or before this date, right? So if it's, by the way, not on before that date, it doesn't matter anyway. Stating that the home value would be at least this price. If it is not, guess what happens? They have two choices. They can either terminate the contract and get their money back, right? Or continue. That's it. Does it say the seller has to do something?
That'd be a gap.
No. No, the gap is really the seller,
Yeah.
the buyer. The buyer will make the difference. Yeah, it's really nothing. None of these have anything to do with the seller having to perform differently. None of these have anything to do with the seller having to change their price. The appraisal gap means that the buyer will make up the difference. If the home appraised different, they'll make up the difference, which I haven't seen the need for those anymore, sadly. But too bad. Not yet.
Because if you want to sell it, then we're gonna, it doesn't appraise, we got-
Well, if you can cancel, and if you have the appraisal contingency. If you don't have the appraisal contingency, you can't talk, is the point, right? Because if you're in the financing contingency and you're not going to be given that opportunity to cancel, guess what? You're making up the difference or you're losing your deposit. Now, one person asked me this, I don't remember who it was recently. They said, Carrie, what happens if the seller of the buyer just walks? Can anything happen to him? Oh, I think it was Bobby. Anyway, yeah, the seller can sue for specific performance. Keep that in mind. The buyer is defaulting for whatever reason. The seller does have the option to sue for specific performance. How do I know that? Well, many, many reasons, but we had two in-house where we were on the sell side. The seller sued for specific performance and won. Now, I'm going to clarify that just a tad bit. They were both on well over $1 million. I think one was 2.5. I don't remember the other one was. And the seller also did a lot of repairs that were requested by the buyer. So when the buyer wanted to get out, the seller was not very happy about the situation, right? So it was a lot different than the situation we were just discussing, right? But can the seller, for any reason at any price, sue for specific performance? The answer is yes. Now, is it quite unlikely at a $500,000 property, if it just didn't appraise, is that the seller going to sue for specific performance? No, it's pretty not unlikely. It's pretty unlikely. Unless they are an attorney and very sue happy themselves and want to do it themselves. We did have that case. The seller was an attorney, really obnoxious from New York, and decided to sue the other side. That happens too. Yeah. So, I mean, these things do happen. Mark.
Is there a quick time to go to the regular homeowners association? This is for something I'm under contract for now.
Yes, and then we'll
I
call
want
it
to
a
get
day.
clarity.
And if you want to continue with this, you guys want to continue Addenda's part 2 next week? Because there are more.
Yes.
Everybody in the room here want to do Addenda's part 2 next week? Oh my God, no drywall. There's no drywall. The home. Uh-huh. Okay, here we go. Okay, what's your question?
So when it talks about the summary part, because I
Yeah.
know I asked this question via email to you, is it just this as the addendum is the summary, or is it the docs that we would want to request, like the declaration, articles,
Oh,
bylaws?
you need all of that. You need all of the articles, the articles of incorporation, the financials, you need the deed restrictions, you need them all.
Okay, because that's
questions.
what I had confusion about, if it wasn't explicitly mentioned, or if there was a way to know that those have to be included, and
No,
it's included
it
in
says
regards
it
to
in
what's
the contract, actually. Homeowners Association.
Masters insurance also.
It says it here. Where is homeowners insurance? I might have gone too far. Oh wait, I'm in residential, aren't I? It's gonna be a long one. Where am I? Let's see here. Okay, okay, here you go. Association community disclosure should be not execute this contract until buyer has received and read the homeowners association community disclosure, if applicable. Oh, that's where you're talking about that.
Well, no, even the addendum says the summary. So that's why I wanted to get clarity on what
You need to
exactly
have
is the summary.
all the documents,
Okay.
that has to go with for the homeowners association. And every homeowners association, so you know, every homeowners association, I think over 250, but I could be wrong, should also have a website they were required to where they have all those documents uploaded.
Okay. I received some of them or a decent amount from the listing agent.
Mhm.
The follow-up question with this, in the event my buyer needs to get out for whatever reason, if I request the documents I'm missing from
Mhm.
the management company, but it's not given to me by the list side, do I still have for my buyer the
You
ability to get
have the
out?
3-day right of rescission once all documents are received. So you still have a 3-day right of rescission because you haven't even gotten all the documents.
Okay, if we need to do that.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. All right, guys. So we will continue this next Monday. Have a great rest of your week. Take care. Thanks for coming.